Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to take on another one of my pandemic projects. It's one of those reels that have been sitting in my project bin for a while now, and most of those have something wrong with them, and this one has something wrong with it, but I'll show you how to repair it if I guessed right. This is a Penn Powergraph 1500. Powergraph is an oddball one. It's a transitional reel. It was made only for 3 years, from 1998 to 2001. And then it was discontinued. So you started to see Captivas and Sargus and others come in and replace it. This is a single ball bearing reel, and if you listen, it's got an annoying little click in there. And that click kind of tells me that the anti-reverse dog, which is up top here, it's not a clutch, it's not an instant anti-reverse, isn't fully releasing. So I went ahead and I ordered a spring, which interestingly enough is still available. I've referenced this an awful lot, mysticparts.com, Mystic Reel Parts, but it's mysticparts.com if you need to order Penn parts. They're a regional distributor, and they sent me this spring, and my guess is what happened here is that somehow this spring has gotten bent. So I think that the best thing to do is replace that as part of the service. And we'll start that service now. So a couple of things as we go through this. A lot of these things are kind of redundant if you've watched me before, but if you haven't watched me before, that's okay too. We're going to take the exterior parts off first. I'll do that by taking off the drag adjuster knob. And then we'll remove the spool. Later on, we'll come into the spool. We'll take a look at the drags just to make sure that they are properly serviced. Now on this one you could just get to the rotor if the rotor was a problem by pulling off this key and the retention washers on it. You'll notice as I'm doing that I'm putting all my pieces and parts into a little parts tray. But if it was just a problem of going ahead and trying to fix that anti-reverse dog, the anti-reverse dog is under the rotor here, and we could simply do that, but we're going to do a full service so that you get a sense of what this reel is. This reel is a single ball bearing reel, so it lines up more with the Penn Silver series than it does with the newer models that have more ball bearings. You saw I just took off a cap here. That's because this reel happens to have a screw that holds the handle in, so it has a through shaft with a screw. And most of the time I'll tell you if you spin the handle to, if that cap isn't moving, then you probably have a reverse threaded handle and you can walk the handle out. In this case I happen to know this reel, but if you start to go to uncrank this and you find out that there's no give in that, then just check under here, because every now and then there's a few manufacturers that hide that screw under there. And you don't want to go ripping up anything or bending anything just on the assumption that this would be a screw-off handle as opposed to a through shaft. This is what I mean by through shaft. That goes through the center of the main gear, and that screw goes into the back here. And I always find as I'm doing this, it's not a bad practice just to take the screw and put it right back where it belongs so that when you go to reinstall, you found it. And then back into the parts tray. You'll also know I'm wearing a protective glove on my hand here, and that protective glove is to keep chemicals and grease and junk off of it. I think you can probably hear it a little bit better now. That shouldn't be on a forward, so it is working, but it's not. That shouldn't be making that noise going forward. So that's what we're going to try and solve for here. All right, we're going to take the case off. The case has 4 mounting screws on it. It looks like these could be taken off with a Phillips head, so I'm going to try that first. The Phillips head is a number 1 Phillips head. It's the smaller of the Phillips head bits. Some folks asked me around this time, can they use mechanical screwdrivers for taking the screws out and putting them in place? I know some of my YouTube compatriots out there will use a mechanical screwdriver when they're doing their reel repair. My recommendation is not to do that. Now on the way out, you're not going to damage too much if you're removing the screw with it. On the way in, particularly with reels like this with plastic or graphite cases, you can shatter them, you can crack them, and you can warp them if you use too much torque in getting those screws down. So I recommend against that. And if you find that you need it, leave the screw short of a full tightening, and then tighten the last bit by hands. You notice I laid all those screws on the table here. That's to make sure all the screw sizes are the same, and I noticed that they were, so I kind of got ahead of myself. And we should be able to take off the side plate now with a little bit of luck. There we go. So the side plate's off. This reel is in pretty good condition, so I think it's just the annoyance of having that click go there. Notice the brass bushing as opposed to a bearing, main gear. And then this has got pretty much a straight up kind of design to it. It's got a crosswind gear, which is driven by the back of the main gear, and it's got a crosswind block which attaches the axle. And when you turn your main gear, that little gear behind on that shaft will rotate this up and down so that the spool collects line up and down on it. Okay, I'm going to remove then the screw in that axle shaft and put that in my parts tray, and then we should be able to pull the axle shaft out. Once you remove that, you can remove the main gear. This is the small gear I was referring to that's going to drive the crosswind gear. And we're going to go ahead now and we're going to take the old grease off. And this doesn't look like it's been serviced that long ago. It's got old grease on it, so as part of your service, you want to get rid of that old grease to the best that you can. If this reel was used in salt water, if it was used in the ocean fishing, and chances are that some of that stuff has penetrated the case. This is not a watertight case here. Chances are something's penetrated it and got its, when the salt dries, that grit gets into the grease and causes rough running. So let's get rid of all of this while we're at it. I'm using a series of paper towels, cotton swabs, and other things just to get it clean there. And as you can tell, internally it's a pretty straightforward setup here. We have an anti-reverse override, which is this bar. It's working fine. A little bit of grease on the back here. We got a second bushing behind. So the one bushing is actually underneath. We have a little metal washer that the crosswind block rides on. I can leave that in the case. There's no need to do anything with that. And then we can come up top and we can remove the nut. Now the nut looks like a 10 millimeter nut. So go to your parts tray and find that wrench. I haven't found that wrench yet, but I will. I tend to work in big pictures, which means I tend to have all of my wrenches together in one pile as opposed to having them laid out in any particular order. And I just find it works easier for me. If you like to line them up, if you like to have them some kind of organized method, go right ahead and do that. This one I noticed has a traditional threading, which means that you turn left to remove it and turn right to tighten it. And here we go. Here's that dog I was talking about, and it looks bent up, and that's probably the reason why this thing isn't working properly. That spring I think should be a straight line. As a matter of fact, it is a straight line. Here's the replacement spring. So chances are what happened, somehow this got out of skew and bent up that anti-reverse spring. We'll show you more of that as I go after the rebuild. We're going to take that one bearing out. We'll take the post out and clean it. And when we reassemble, we'll show you how to do that. So I'm going to just leave that part on my desk here because it doesn't take long to do this piece. You want to remove your pinion gear. To do that, you have these two screws that are holding the bearing in, and the bearing is acting as a collar holding the pinion gear in. Once you do that, you can just simply pull it. And we're going to do the same thing here that we did with the other pieces. We're going to just wipe off the old grease. This might be hard to see, but I'm holding my fingernail in the grooves and I'm turning the gear to clear the grease out of the channel. Now I'm going to reapply some new grease. I'm going to use, in this case, I'm going to use Penn precision reel grease. Yeah, it's a Penn reel, but you don't need to use Penn grease on a Penn reel. You just need to use fishing reel grease. In this case, it just happens that it's a Penn reel. All right, nice dose of that. we've got a bearing here. I'm going to just load that up with oil. I oil bearings and I grease bushings and the like. I'm going to use Real-X. That's an aftermarket synthetic fishing reel oil. If you wanted to, you could use a Penn oil or any other oil that's designed for fishing reels. Please, I've said this so many times now that I think people stop me in the street and they're ready to tell me enough already. But if you're working on a fishing reel, please use fishing reel lubricants. Don't use general household products. They only cause some problems. Okay, as I mentioned, I'm going right back to reinstalling that. I've put the bearing on the pinion gear, and now we're going to put the 2 screws in that hold that in place. And then we'll come up and we'll deal with that little anti-reverse spring. It was called the silent spring. Interestingly enough, when I went to order it, it was called the silent spring. Well, this is anything but silent. Yeah, we have a straight line here. Well, maybe we can see this as we take the other one off. This one is all bent up, so I don't know what happened there, but something happened there. And now we have a straight spring. And interestingly enough, the spring is to the other side of the throw. So, curious. Let's see how it works, because this one is a clockwise kind of a bend. This was a counterclockwise. So I'll be interested to see if it's going to do the right thing. But I don't know why that design changed, but maybe somebody broke this. Maybe it's possible that somebody put a replacement spring and it happened to be the wrong spring. And maybe that's what caused this thing to begin with. Again, this reel looks like it's been serviced, and it's 20 years since it was manufactured, so that's probably a good thing that it's been serviced, and maybe that's what happened. Something went wrong with the anti-reverse here, and somebody took a spring that didn't belong on this. Well, we're going to find out soon enough, I'm sure. Okay, this also has a spring down below here. You can see it's in the a little cavity here. That spring holds the anti-reverse dog on, keeps pressure on it, and then if you go to override this by turning that switch, it'll push it in so that you can backpedal the reel. This traditionally it grabs on these saw teeth inside the rotor, and that's what makes it stop when this point here intersects with that groove in the rotor. All right, I'm going to just put that back the right way. I'm going to reinstall the collar then, and this flips right into that little space. So that's doing what it should do, and ideally now we should be able to, yep, there you go. So you can see that it's going to pull that right in as we would expect it to. And I can't wait to reinstall and make sure that it works properly. All right, work's done here. We've oiled the bearing. We've changed that spring out. We're going to go put the rotor back on. We know that when we go to reinstall this, that it's a traditional threaded one, so you turn to the right. You can grab your 10mm wrench and snug it up. And I'm quiet. That's what I wanted to hear. Nothing. All right, and we're stopping. Now we have a little wobble in that rotor which says I haven't tightened this nut enough. So you want to go give it another little turn there. That's better. That's tightened that up. Okay, we've greased the pinion gear. Got a bushing here that fell out, so that belongs in the back case. It's pretty tight tolerances, so you have to work to get it just to the point where all sides are going in at the same time, like we did with the bearing and the pinion gear. We're not in yet. At least it doesn't appear that we're in. Yeah, we're in. It just rides a little high. Okay, next up then, we're going to just put the parts back. This is why that parts tray is good. You know where to look for your pieces and parts. All right, we got to put some grease onto the back of the crosswind block gear, and some onto the front of it because the block will ride on that. And lay that in. When we lay that in, we want to put the stud low on this gear so that the crosswind block can get there with easy access once we install the rest of the set here. All right, we've cleaned up the main gear. We're going to get grease onto that. I'm getting ahead of myself. Check all your teeth. Make sure that all the teeth are uniform, both this way as well as this way, that there's no cracks or chips. Do the same thing in the back. If you've got missing teeth or that, the reel will not perform properly. We know that from the initial problems that we had here that was not the case. The reel seemed to be turning fine, just turned with a noise. Just took the bushing off. I'm going to put a little bit of grease on that before I reinstall the bushing. Now we can grab the crosswind block. Shouldn't have to look too far. We put everything into the case. We've cleaned the back off, so come on back now and put some more grease back into the channel so that it can ride easily. And then we can set that. The one tip goes under the override and the other tip to the left here. If you had any questions about where this thing went, then I would advise to do what I'm doing here. Take pictures along the way. If you're just opening up a reel and you're not familiar with that reel, by all means, grab your digital camera, grab your phone, grab something like this actually, which is taking the movie, and just record critical junctions in your process so that you know, if you need to go back as a reference point, that you can find what it is that went where. Right now I'm just trying to load the axle into the crosswind block. And I'm just not going in square here. There we go. So you need to make sure that you get all the way down so that you can find the hole for the screw. And then the hole for the screw goes in. We can tighten that up. Now, some folks like to use Loctite on some screws. They're afraid that the vibration from boats and that is going to rattle those screws free. My recommendation is do not use that. If you ever have to come and take that reel apart again, it's near impossible to get those screws out without breaking them. Okay, we've done this part. Side plate is clean. We're just going to go ahead and snap that in place. You want to make sure that your seam all the way around on your side plate is good. Come on back in now and take those 4 screws that you had. And because we know that all those screws are the same size, it doesn't matter which slot you're putting them in. Again, if you found that you had one that was shorter, then you have to note where in the case that short screw came from, so that you could get it back into the right slot on the way towards reassembly. And then what I like to do on these is I like to make sure that as I'm reinstalling, I go opposite corners just to keep the torque and tension correct. So I call it northeast, southwest, even though on a compass it may not be exact. So let's call that south and north. Let's call this east. Now, if you were using that mechanical screwdriver, you can use it, but leave it about 1/8 of an inch from the completion. Leave it out, and then use your screwdriver to finish the tightening. Like I said, I've seen too many of these reels come in with cracked side plates or warped main gears because they just they over tightened. There's no need to do that. Okay, we'll give it a spin. It's spinning. Nice. Handle back on, then we'll go up top and we'll finish the work by looking at those drags. Now, if you are stuck on a reel, not particularly this reel, you can always go just where I showed you that business card from. You can go to mysticparts.com. They have a full line of schematics for Penn reels. They are they used to be called pennparts.com. Now they've expanded to do some aftermarket pen product things in addition to the standard pen replacement parts. I think we actually saw, not too long ago, I did a video on hot rodding a Penn squitter using a Brian Young Ultimate Drag upgrade. That was purchased from Mystic Parts. That's not a Penn product, right? Okay, so we've got the screw tightened down so the handle is good. We can put that cap back on. We can come up top and grab that click. That's going to click when your spool starts going in reverse because the drag is being let out. There's a little clicker here. It's just a little plastic tongue. And as your spool spins backwards, it's going to click. Okay, let's take the drags out of this body then. There's a hectagonal clip that rides in a channel. You want to grab it. It's going to spring, so hold your finger on it when you take it out. And then you can just kind of run something under there, a toothpick, a nail. I use an awl. It doesn't really matter what you're using. Just make sure that you have control of it so that you don't lose it. And this is a series of Teflon washers here. Oops, one just shot. Okay, so Teflon washers you don't do anything with. They're a plastic product by its nature. They're self-lubricating, so you don't need to do anything there. Just make sure your channel's clean. When you're working with a top-end drag on a reel, that's taking the brunt of the water. When you're reeling in, wet line is coming and wrapping around the spool, and water gets in there, and water has contaminants in it. So just make sure that as you're doing this, that you're in lockstep. Just pulling the washers off here. We'll get the sequence down on this in a moment. So we have 3 plastics, we have 3 metals, and we have a cap washer. So the plastic one goes in first. Then we have a round one. And we do the second of the plastics. Then there's always an eared one. This is going to ride in the channel grooves. And in this case, this was facing down. So we're going to place that down and in the channel so that it fits in those grooves. Last of the plastics, last of the metals. And then we have that cap washer, which was up top. And then we can grab the clip, start it in the groove, just press to one side, holding it until you hear it snap in. Make sure it's seated in the other one. And we're good. Now that clip doesn't do anything other than hold these in place. So we can take the spool, put that back on. Oh, seems like we popped out there. Let's just grab that quickly. What happened was I got the little tag on that spring offset a little bit. As a result of that, we slipped under the tag. Let's try this again. So what happened was that tag was in that hole and probably shouldn't be. Not probably, it shouldn't be. So work your way to where it's not going to be interfering there. And reset that. Make sure it's in the groove. In this case, it's below the groove here. You just want to snap that in. There you go. All right, we can try this again then. We're on. We're going to go ahead and tighten this. And this is that little plastic tongue on that click ratchet. As your drag is letting out, you will hear that. So that's operating properly. It's meshed. And now I'm tightening the other way, and we're fully tightened. And now, listen to that, a nice quiet Penn Powergraph 1500. So we found out that 2 things have happened here. The first one was it was making a horrible noise. That meant that the anti-reverse wasn't fully retracting. We went in and we found the spring, and the spring was all bent up. That line should have been straight. It was all bent up and kind of out of the ordinary. And then the other thing we found out about the spring was it was reversed for whatever reason. So this may not have been belonging to this particular reel. At any rate, replacing that spring has cured the problem. Now we have an active anti-reverse that's silent. and this reel's ready to go fishing again. So this is a nice reel. It only has the one ball bearing up top. It has brass bushings as opposed to plastic below, so that's a nice solid construction. It's got Penn quality to it, and like I mentioned, it was only available for 3 years there before they upgraded to the next series. So that's it. So if you take on projects like this, I hope that's helped. If you're a little intimidated but you have a reel that needs to be repaired, you can always drop me a line. I do repair reels by mail. If you have questions and comments, please leave them. I try to respond to all of them, even if your question and comment has nothing to do with this particular reel. If it's just a fishing reel repair question in general, I'll try to help you if you're stumped along the way. And I'm trying to publish a lot of these during this pandemic just to keep everybody kind of with a little bit of sanity as we all kind of hunker down and shelter in and all the like. So I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, please like this and subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. And we'll look forward to showing you the next one coming up soon. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.